Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling disability discourse analysis. You know how the way we talk about disability actually shapes the reality for people living with it? We're going to be digging into some articles from the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit website to help us really unpack some of the ideas here.
It's pretty amazing how language can be so powerful,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like disability discourse analysis. It's like we're taking all these words, images, and ideas around disability and then looking at how they actually impact people's lives.
So it's not just the words themselves, but like the whole system of communication around disability.
Exactly. Like every time we talk about disability, we're sort of participating in this bigger conversation, a discourse.
Right?
And it shapes how we interact with the world, and it can have some real serious consequences, creating barriers or even opportunities for people.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. But before we go too far, maybe we could take a step back and define some key concepts so we're all on the same page.
Sure, yeah. I think one of the most important things to understand is the difference between the medical and social models of disability.
Okay.
The medical model, it's been around for a long time, it kind of sees disability as a problem inside the individual, like something that needs fixing.
So it's like saying, okay, this person can't walk, so we need to find a way to make them walk.
Exactly. But the social model, that's like a whole different perspective.
Okay.
It says that disability is actually created by the barriers in society and our attitudes, not by the individual's, impairments.
Huh.
You mentioned before that you're interested in architecture, right?
Yeah.
So think about it like this. A building that's only designed with stairs. The medical model would be like, oh, the problem is that people can't climb the stairs. But the social model says, no, the building itself is the problem. It's excluding people who use wheelchairs.
Right.
So it's not about fixing the person. It's about changing society.
Okay, that's a really helpful distinction. So we've got these two basic models. What other key concepts should we be thinking about?
Well, one that people get kind of tripped up on is ableism.
Ableism.
Yeah. Most people understand, blatant discrimination, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ableism, it can be way more subtle. It's like these everyday assumptions and stereotypes that we don't even realize can be hurtful.
Oh, okay.
Like, when we say something is lame, or we ask someone if they're blind, if they make a mistake.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely heard that.
Yeah, even when we don't mean anything bad by it, it can still reinforce this idea that disability is like a negative thing.
I'm realizing I probably said some of those things myself without even thinking about it. It's kind of scary how deeply ingrained that stuff can be, huh?
It really is.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be mindful,
Absolutely.
Really pay attention to the words we use.
Okay. So we've got the medical and social models, ableism, anything else?
Well, there's this idea of normalization, which is really interesting.
Normalization.
Yeah, it's all about how society decides what's normal and then what's not.
Oh, interesting.
And those definitions, they can really exclude people with disabilities.
So it's like these unspoken rules about how we're supposed to look and act and function in the world.
Exactly. And those norms often don't consider the huge range of human experiences and abilities out there.
Makes sense. So people with disabilities can feel like they don't belong, like they have to fit into this narrow box to be accepted.
Exactly.
That's where disability discourse analysis comes in.
Exactly. It helps us see those boxes, challenge those assumptions.
Okay. So we talked about models, ableism, normalization. What about identity? How does this analysis look at the individual experiences of people with disabilities?
Well, that's one of the most crucial parts, right? It's
Yeah.
about centering their voices and understanding how their identities are shaped by the way we talk about disability.
So moving beyond those stereotypical narratives that portray people with disabilities as either objects of pity or superhuman inspirations.
Exactly. We need to see beyond those tropes and engage with the real lived realities of disabled individuals.
I'm starting to see how this is so much more than just analyzing words. It's about real people's lives.
It really is. And to do it well, I think we need to look at some of the theories behind it all.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's dive into some theory.
Yeah.
Okay, we've laid some good groundwork. I'm ready to get theoretical. What do we got?
So, have you ever heard of social constructionism?
Maybe. Rings a bell.
Basically, it's this idea that disability isn't some fixed thing.
Uh-huh.
It's actually something that we as a society create and define.
Oh, okay. So it's not just like a medical fact.
Exactly. So it encourages us to think, how does society decide what it even means to be disabled?
Okay, I'm starting to remember this now.
Yeah, and those definitions, they can totally change over time, you know?
Right.
Even between cultures, what's a disability in one place might not be in another. It's wild.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that. What other theories are there?
Well, there's something called Foucauldian analysis, which is really interesting.
Foucauldian. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it comes from this guy, Michel Foucault, this French philosopher.
Okay.
He was really into like power and knowledge, you know,
Uh-huh.
and how they work together.
Okay.
Like he said, power isn't just about like, you know, individuals or institutions. It's like everywhere, like built into society.
So it's like those unspoken rules about what's normal.
Exactly. And he thought those norms, they get created and enforced through discourse.
Discourse.
Yeah, like the way we talk about things, the categories, the stories we tell, all that.
Okay, and how does that apply to, disability?
Well, think about a doctor's office, right?
Okay.
The doctor has all this knowledge and authority, so they get to say what's normal for a patient's body.
Uh-huh.
And their diagnosis can like really impact a person's life, like whether they can get a job, get resources, all that.
Wow, yeah. It's like the doctor's words have power to like shape a person's reality, even if it's not really accurate.
But that's it. That's Foucault in action.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got social constructionism and Foucauldian analysis. Any other theories we should know about?
Yeah, there's one more that's super important, narrative analysis.
Okay.
So it looks at the stories we tell about disability, right?
Uh-huh.
Both our personal stories and the ones society tells, and how they shape our understanding of what it means to be disabled.
So it's like recognizing that stories have this huge power to influence how we see the world, right?
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
think about those really common narratives about disability.
Yeah.
Like the, overcoming obstacle story, or like the burden to society story.
Right.
They can actually do more harm than good, even if people mean well.
Yeah, because they put people with disabilities into these like tiny little boxes.
Exactly.
And those boxes don't really capture the reality of their experiences.
Nope, not at all. So narrative analysis, it encourages us to listen to people with disabilities on their terms,
Yeah.
to hear their stories in their own words, and to challenge those like dominant narratives that try to silence them.
Okay, so we've got these three theories: social constructionism, Foucauldian analysis, and narrative analysis.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how they work together to, understand this whole discourse thing.
They do. It's like a framework for looking at the world through a different lens, right?
Right, yeah. Now, I'm kind of curious, how do researchers actually use these theories? Like, what are the actual methods they use to do this analysis?
Well, one way is something called critical discourse analysis, CDA for short.
CDA, okay.
It's like we're taking language and, dissecting it, really looking for those hidden power dynamics and ideologies.
So it's like going deeper than just the surface meaning of the words?
Exactly. It's all about context. Like, how do social and political forces shape the way we use language?
Okay, I think I get it. Can you give me an example, maybe? Like how CDA is used with disability?
Sure. Imagine like a news article about disability, right?
Okay.
A CDA researcher would look at the words they use to describe disabled people,
Uh-huh.
the pictures they choose, the overall story they're telling.
Okay.
Like, are disabled people seen as active participants, or are they just passive recipients of care?
I see. So you're looking at how the media can reinforce stereotypes or maybe challenge them.
Exactly. And it's not just the media, CDA can be used on anything, really, from like policy documents to everyday conversations.
Wow, that's really versatile. So CDA is all about analyzing the text, right?
Yeah.
But what about understanding like the actual lived experiences of people with disabilities? How do you study that?
Well, that's where ethnography comes in.
Ethnography.
Yeah, it's kind of like immersing yourself in the lives of the people you're studying. Like, you're observing, listening to their stories, trying to see the world from their perspective.
It's more about like getting out there in the real world and talking to people.
Exactly. It's about building relationships and letting those lived experiences guide the research,
I can see how that would give you a much deeper understanding than just reading some text. What else is there?
Have you heard of corpus linguistics?
Corpus linguistics. No, that's a new one.
It's pretty cool. It involves analyzing tons and tons of text, like massive data sets.
Oh, wow.
And we call those data sets corpora.
Corpora, okay.
And we can use computers to find patterns and trends in the language.
So it's like big data for language.
Yeah, exactly. Like imagine you had a corpus of, I don't know, tweets about disability. Right?
Okay, yeah.
You could use corpus linguistics to see like what are the most common words and phrases? What are the main themes?
Oh, wow.
Even the emotional tone, like is it positive, negative?
That's amazing. It's like having a robot assistant to help you make sense of all that information.
It kind of is.
That's really cool. So we've got CDA, ethnography, corpus linguistics. What else?
Well, media analysis is huge, especially now.
Media analysis, yeah.
It's all about how disability is shown in movies, TV, news, even social media, the whole picture.
Right, right.
And we look at how those portrayals shape how we think about disability.
So you might look at how many disabled characters are there in a show?
Exactly.
Or what words are used to describe them, even the camera angles, all that stuff.
Exactly. All those details contribute to the message,
Yeah, it's like media literacy, but for disability.
That's a great way to put it. And, we can use media analysis to push for more realistic portrayals.
Right, more inclusive, less stereotypical.
Exactly. Okay, one more for you. Have you heard of policy discourse analysis?
Policy.
I don't think so.
It's a really important one.
Yeah.
It focuses on the actual language used in laws and policies about disability.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like using CDA, but specifically for policy documents.
Gotcha.
How does a law define disability? What assumptions does it make?
Yeah, that makes sense. So, is it fair to people with disabilities? Exactly. Does it promote inclusion? Does it create more barriers?
Wow. So this method is really crucial for making sure policies are actually helpful.
It really is.
Okay. That's a lot of different approaches. We've got CDA, ethnography, corpus linguistics, media analysis, and policy discourse analysis. I'm starting to see how they each give us a different perspective on disability discourse.
Yeah. They all fit together, right?
Right. Like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly. And, the more tools we have, the better we'll be at understanding this complex issue and advocating for change.
Okay, so we've talked about all these methods. Earlier, you mentioned that the articles we're looking at are from this Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? What is that exactly?
Well, it's basically like an online platform,
Okay.
designed to help people analyze different types of discourse, including disability discourse.
Oh, cool. So it's got tools to help you figure out all these language patterns and stuff.
Exactly.
That's really cool. What's even cooler is that it uses AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence.
So it can do some of the heavy lifting for you.
Right. It can automate a lot of the more tedious parts of the analysis.
So you can focus on the bigger picture stuff.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this AI toolkit can be used for, disability discourse analysis?
Sure. Imagine you're looking at how disability is portrayed on social media, right?
Yep.
You could gather all these tweets, feed them into the toolkit, and then see what are the most common words and phrases?
Right.
What themes are emerging?
Right.
What's the overall tone?
So it's you have this digital assistant that's helping you sift through all that data and find the really important stuff.
That's a perfect way to put it.
That's incredible. So that's great for researchers. But what about regular people? How could someone who's not an academic use this?
Oh, yeah. It's not just for academics. A disability rights group could use it to analyze policy documents or how the media is talking about disability issues.
Right. And they can use that information to advocate for change,
So it's not just about understanding how disability discourse works. It's about actually using that knowledge to make things better.
Exactly.
Oh, cool. I'm seeing how this toolkit can be a really powerful tool for, education and advocacy.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, this is all really fascinating. Yeah, I feel like I have a much better grasp of all these methods,
Me too. And what's cool?
Right.
This field is always changing. There are always new methods being developed.
Oh, wow.
And people are finding new ways to use them.
So it's a really dynamic and growing field.
Absolutely. It's really exciting to be a part of it, honestly.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it's time to get into some specifics.
Okay.
The articles we're looking at, they mention some big names in the field, right?
Yeah, definitely.
People who've done some really important work.
Yeah, pioneers.
Yeah. So I think it'd be really cool to dive into their work and see how they've used these concepts, in action.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the big ideas, the theories, all these different methods. even that AI toolkit.
That's a lot, right?
It is. But I think, the biggest question I have now is, like, why should I even care? Like, what's the point of all this? How does it affect real people?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's not just some academic exercise. It actually has a real impact on people's lives.
So, like, it's not just theory, it's about action.
Exactly. Understanding how all this works can help us all be better communicators, better advocates.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me some examples. Like, how can this analysis actually make a difference?
Well, let's start with policy, okay?
Okay.
By, looking at how disability policies are written.
Uh-huh.
We can try to get rid of discriminatory language, fight for more funding and resources, and make sure policies actually work for people with disabilities.
So it's like using discourse analysis to fight for social justice.
Right.
Like actually change the systems that are creating barriers.
That's a really good way to put it. And it's not just policy either. Think about the media.
Okay.
We can use this analysis to push for better portrayals of disability in movies, TV shows, news, all that.
Yeah, like more realistic, more diverse representation.
Exactly. That can help change people's attitudes,
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes society more inclusive and understanding.
Right.
And, this kind of analysis can also help disability rights groups be more effective.
Oh, really? How?
Well, if they understand how language shapes how people think, they can be more strategic.
Yeah.
They can create better campaigns, make more convincing arguments.
So they can actually change more minds and get more support.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's really smart.
But I think most importantly, disability discourse analysis can just make everyone more aware, more informed.
Right? Like we all need to be more mindful of the language we use and more understanding of what it's like to live with a disability.
That's the goal, because when more people understand, that's when things really start to change.
So it's like a chain reaction, right?
Yeah.
More awareness leads to better language, better policies, and ultimately a better world for everyone.
Exactly.
Man, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's been great.
Yeah. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to keep learning about this and, do their part to make things better.
That's what we hope for. So any final thoughts for our listeners today?
How about this? Now that you know more about how all this works, how can you use your voice to challenge stereotypes and fight for inclusion?
Love it. It's a call to action, We all have a role to play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, every conversation is a chance to make a difference.
Well said.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into disability discourse analysis.
It's been a pleasure. Keep learning and keep questioning everything. We'll see you next time.